I really am pleased to be here, and it was a trip when the other things came up. I said I wasn't going to send my regrets. I wanted to talk to you and talk with you about some of the things that you're addressing. I'm also, I told Jonathan I've rewritten what I was going to say about 3 times listening this morning. I'm almost back to where I started, but not quite. I am glad to be the first one up after the wonderful lunch you provided, because the food coma has not yet set in. I hope. But you know, some of the things that I was, those who know me know I have some, if not rules, I have words to live by. And the first thing I thought of this morning in terms of rules to live by as I was listening is for every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's wrong. The mayor gave me another one that I'm going to add to my list, I think, which I think she was the one who said we should stop working at being impressive and look to accept or to be impressed by other people's viewpoints and thoughts. And I think that's incredibly important, especially as we're looking at land management and the issues that face us. And I'll give you one more. Nothing is impossible to those who don't have to do it. So, and we all do. So maybe I'll give you one more, and everything is possible to those who don't yet know what they're talking about. You know, when I look at some of the, you know, the 4 questions, the first one, you know, what is crucial for attendees to know? I understand the problems you were talking about, and I actually believe we have many of the same problems, whether they're transportation, whether they're housing, whether, you know, those kind of things. But the biggest problem, or the biggest thing that I think it's crucial that everybody in this room understands, and we understand bigger than this room, is preservation of this ecosystem is not guaranteed. We all came here around. Well, not we all. I mean, we have a lot of amenity migrants that are in this room. They came to this place. They've created these communities. They've created this place because of what a special place this is, whether it's the Grand Tetons or whether it's Yellowstone National Park. But it's not guaranteed. It's an incredible vigilance that needs to be, that we are responsible for ensuring that we protect these places. And it's not easy. National Geographic is going to do the article that Jonathan mentioned, or that, not the article, it's going to be a magazine. It's not just on Yellowstone, it's on the Yellowstone ecosystem. But the premise of that article is, what is it going to take for us as a society to make the kinds of decisions we need to make to protect these kind of places? And it's going to use the grizzly bear as that species of animal that says, can we make the decisions that we can make sure a grizzly bear can survive in this ecosystem? What does that mean for all of the decisions that we make on an everyday basis? And I'm not talking about the article now, I'm talking about what does that mean to us? What are we going to do about the development issues that you're facing outside of the parks, and look at how it affects things inside the park? When we propose a development in Yellowstone National Park or Grand Teton or any other place, we go through the National Environmental, Protection Act. We go through an EIS process. We talk about cumulative impacts. Not just that development, but how does that stack up with everything, and how is it going to affect the environment? You have planning systems and things in place in your community in Jackson. I can't say the same for other communities that surround Yellowstone National Park. Are we willing to do those kind of things that are going to preserve this place? Transboundary wildlife issues. The scene that's playing out in the northern boundary of Yellowstone National Park would make most of you sick to your stomachs today, because we are required to manage under a court-ordered agreement the population limits in Yellowstone National Park. One of the most difficult, controversial things that we have to do, but we do it every year until we can find other ways to have a social acceptance for bison in Montana. It's a much bigger problem in Montana than it is Wyoming. Native fish conservation. In Yellowstone National Park, we have more miles of stream today that have non-native fish in them than we had miles of stream that had native fish when the park was founded. That has an ecological impact. Are we willing to make the decisions to do that? The controversy around killing non-native lake trout in Yellowstone National Park was something I couldn't believe. I thought there was one issue when I came to Yellowstone National Park that everyone could get behind, and that was the restoration of native fish. I was wrong. Sport fishing, for many, is as important as preservation or protection of an ecosystem. Are we willing to make the decisions to preserve the place? Climate change. That's I've got 10 minutes. I can't introduce that topic in Yellowstone in 10 minutes. So let me just say, climate change in Yellowstone National Park, in Grand Teton, and every other national park is going to have a tremendous impact on that ecosystem. But what are we willing to do as a society to do something about that? There are higher temperatures in the summer, but that's not our biggest problem. The biggest problem is when moisture is coming, how it's coming. How cold does it get in the winter? The biggest difference in our temperature is not heat in the summer, it's how cold it is in the winter. And what's the impact of that on this environment and on this place in terms of long-term preservation? We already talked a little bit about development at boundaries. And then we have advocacy for special uses. I'll mention paddling, just because I can't help myself. I understand what's in it for the people who want to paddle, but I don't understand what's in it for Yellowstone or preservation of that resource. Anybody in the world can tell me it's not going to hurt the resource, and I'm going to tell them they're wrong. Because every use in Yellowstone National Park has had some detrimental effect on that resource. I made an offer to the community who wanted to do it. I said, let's forget about the legislation that mandates a use, which it does. If you doubt it, read the legislation. It mandates a use in Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park and certain rivers and streams, but allows us to make regulations for how it will be used. And then it requests that we evaluate every river and stream within that, requires. The offer I made is, will you ask the Representative Lummis to remove that mandate if we agree to do a full EIS on river use in Yellowstone National Park that would evaluate all uses, all users who want to do it, and if I'm willing to accept the decision as part of the federal government, will you be willing to accept the decision as an advocacy for one type? The answer was no. What do? I fight it. So those are things I wish you would know. Single biggest issue. Yellowstone's going to have another year in the ecosystem in Grand Teton of unprecedented visibility. It's going to happen with, you're going to have a National Geographic issue that's going to go out in 40 languages and 60 million people are going to see that on some. Nobody's going to have that. We had a 16.6% increase in visitation last year. Gas prices are even lower this year than they were last year. What's it going to be? We have no idea. Jonathan said, and he's correct, Montana's out promoting the park, northwest corner of Yellowstone. Wyoming's out promoting the northwest corner. Every local tourism community is out promoting the northwest corner of Wyoming for understandable reasons. I started a social science program in Yellowstone about 3 years ago with a postdoc. And I just hired my first permanent employee of the social science program about 6 months ago. The first job I gave them when they came is I said, I want you to figure out who our visitors are, why they're coming, what their expectations are, and if we're meeting those expectations. Some days this past summer, it took over 2 hours to drive the 14 miles from West Yellowstone to Madison Junction. We had traffic jams, wildlife jams that aren't just unique to Yellowstone. They happen in Grand Teton. They'd be 4, 5, 6 miles long. People would stay in them forever. I was asked if I came down to Grand Teton this summer, and I said I didn't have time. It's a problem. And the problem that we all have to face, are we willing, as these communities, our constituency is not the 5 counties that surround Yellowstone and Grand Teton, or Yellowstone National Park. We have 5 counties. I don't know how many more I'd add for Grand Teton. But those 5, are we willing to make decisions? Are we going to come to terms with we may have to make decisions to limit visitation to Yellowstone National Park in order to assure that the quality of visit and preservation of that resource is done for the future? I'm going to test that theory. It's not going to be an easy conversation. It's already not an easy conversation, but I'd like you to be part of it. And I can guarantee you it's a different conversation in this community than it is Cody or Gardner or West Yellowstone or Cheyenne or Helena. It's a different conversation. Those are the challenges. Opportunity. I've got 10 minutes, folks. Ecosystem management. We are so far beyond being able to manage within our jurisdictional boundaries. The opportunity is for ecosystem management. I mentioned, I'm just going to use Yellowstone. I'll let David talk for Grand Teton. But 1 park, 5 counties, 3 states. We always don't agree. Grizzly bears. For the first time, they're coming up for delisting. For the first time, I've seen actually the Fish and Wildlife Service working with 3 states on the basis of ecosystem management of a species when they're trying to take it off the threatened list in the case of grizzly bears. I think that's incredibly important. And I'm glad, I'm grateful, I'm hopeful, in terms of ecosystem management is a key to successful delisting. I don't want to confuse anyone. We believe the population numbers are sufficient for delisting. That's our position. But we do care about what those rules and strategies say around the delisting of grizzly bears. We don't know what they're going to say yet. We're in the same position all of you are. We haven't seen the conservation strategy and we haven't seen the delisting rule. But when we do, we'll be critically engaged in that conversation. The point I'll make here and the point I'll make that I make to the federal family and land management is the requirement for delisting is based on science of the population and sustainability of that population, and it's based on population level impacts in terms of what they might do. People do not relate to grizzly bears on a population level. They relate to grizzly bears on an individual level. 399 in your park is probably one of the greatest examples, or in the Grand Teton, of people relating on an individual level, but that's not the requirement of delisting. The delisting is a population management. How do we have that conversation productively? And the constituency for that is a worldwide constituency. It's not a Wyoming, Montana, or Idaho constituency. I'll finish up with what's the one thing the community can do? I think it's simple for me. It's engagement, it's involvement, it's caring about these issues, it's letting us know, letting others know what's important to you. How does it affect your community? Understand the actions of your communities, your states, and your areas in terms of what you do. How does that affect these places that we're all, I think, very concerned and trying very hard to protect? Thank you.